Madam Lynch pointed at Dustin and uttered with a trembling voice, He just killed Holly. What? Holly is dead. Alan was shocked and stood there in stunned silence. He had only thought there was a disturbance, not a murder case. Not to mention, Holly had been the victim. She was an important member of the Celestial Alliance and held a higher position than he did. With her sudden death, it was likely to send shockwaves across the Celestial Alliance. Madam Lynch, are you? You're not joking, right? Holly really died. Alan still couldn't quite believe it. Holly was a member of the Celestial Alliance. She was powerful and skilled at reading people. How could she possibly be killed? Oh my, why would I joke about something so serious? My two girls saw it clearly. Holly's body is upstairs right now. If you don't believe it, you can send someone to check, Jenny said, breaking into a cold sweat. You two go up and check. Alan quickly ordered his henchmen to investigate. Soon, two henchmen rushed downstairs and delivered the same grim news. Holly was indeed dead. She was killed with a single blow. Upon hearing the news, Alan erupted in anger. His fierce gaze turned toward Dustin, and he sternly said, You. Do you even realize what you've done? You'll pay for this with your life. True to his words, he commanded his men, get him, tear him into pieces, and feed him to the dogs. Holly's death couldn't go unpunished. If they didn't avenge her today, they would all face consequences. Attack. Without hesitation, the martial artists from the Celestial Alliance charged forward with their weapons. Dustin emotionlessly raised a hand, and a large number of silver needles shot out from his sleeves, instantly immobilizing all the Celestial Alliance martial artists. Each had a needle stuck in their necks. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't move an inch. What's happening? The crowd was baffled. All they could see was the Celestial Alliance martial artists running and suddenly freezing in place, as if under a petrification spell. Truly mysterious. Acupoint sealing technique. Alan frowned as he figured it out. With a simple wave, Dustin froze over a dozen martial artists. This acupoint sealing technique was truly mysterious. It was something not just any expert could achieve. I admit you've got some skills, but you've offended the entire Celestial Alliance. So you're as good as dead. Alan's face darkened as he slowly drew his sword from his waist. Let me repeat myself. Holly's death has nothing to do with me. Someone framed me, Dustin said calmly. He was well aware of the Celestial Alliance's reputation. It was one of the three giants in the martial world alongside the Mystic Arts Order and the Sword Union. If there wasn't a deep-seated grudge, he didn't want to be enemies with them. So he held back earlier to avoid causing harm. If you're framed, then come with me to the Celestial Alliance headquarters. You can explain it there. But before that, you have to surrender. Alan spoke coldly. He didn't believe Dustin, but he wasn't confident about winning the fight right now. So he tried to trick Dustin into the Celestial Alliance headquarters. Once there, Dustin wouldn't escape death even if he had great skills. I'm not one to entrust my life to others, so I can't agree to your terms, Dustin replied. Suddenly, he brought Eleanor and Elena forward, tossing them to Alan's side. Holly's death is linked to these two. The Celestial Alliance won't have a hard time getting information out of them. Alan slightly frowned as he looked at Eleanor and Elena. No, it's not our fault. We didn't do anything. We're innocent. Elena fearfully shook her head as she tried to explain. Mr. Bossman, we're friends with Holly. How could we harm her? Please don't let lies deceive you. Eleanor cried. Then she pointed at Dustin. It's all him. He killed Holly and shifted the blame to us. We're defenseless girls. We couldn't fight back. Please, Mr. Bossman, stand up for us. Stand up for Holly. Alan was infuriated when he looked at their pitiful looks. Own up to what you've done. What kind of men uses girls as scapegoats? I speak the truth. Their hearts are more malicious than you can imagine. You'll only harm yourself and others if you trust them, Dustin warned. Nonsense! Alan glared at him and shouted. Everyone saw you kill Holly. How dare you argue? It seems you won't confess until there's bloodshed." Without a word, Alan charged at Dustin. His sword sliced through the air toward Dustin's head. Still, Dustin didn't move, and with a simple wave of his hand, the blade shattered instantly. Alan seemed to have anticipated the attack. He seized the chance when the blade shattered and swiftly aimed another strike at Dustin's neck. The attack was fast and fierce. Just when it seemed Dustin was in danger, he suddenly extended two fingers and effortlessly caught the blade between them. What? Alan was stunned, utterly incredulous. His blade was sharp, yet Dustin easily caught it between two fingers. How unbelievable! I have limited patience. Don't lay a hand on me again, or I won't be so kind, Dustin said coldly. He didn't want any trouble, so he wasn't going to offend the Celestial Alliance. But if they pushed too hard, he wouldn't let them take advantage of him. I know you're tough, but someone has to be responsible for Holly's death. You're not leaving this place today. Alan persisted, his long knife deflecting Dustin's fingers and then slashing toward his waist. You underestimate me. Dustin snorted and swiftly delivered a palm strike to Alan's chest. Alan was sent flying. He crashed through a table and landed heavily on the ground. Spitting out blood, he couldn't stand up. The crowd was astonished at the sight. No one expected Dustin to be this strong. He could even take down a group of Celestial Alliance aces single-handedly. As everyone exchanged puzzled looks, a frightening pressure suddenly loomed over them. Someone in the crowd asked, "What's happening?" "It's like my body suddenly got heavier." Another agreed, "Such a strong pressure." Could it be an ace arriving? The unexpected heaviness in the air silenced the previously bustling Poise brothel. A sense of impending disaster crept into everyone's hearts. Dustin raised an eyebrow as he turned to glance at the entrance. Following the tension, a tall figure in white walked in. He had sharp eyebrows, a majestic appearance, and a piercing gaze that radiated authority. He was so imposing that everyone looked at him in awe. It's Fenley! It's Fenley from the Celestial Alliance! A surprised exclamation echoed through the crowd. In an instant, the entire Poise brothel buzzed with excitement. A surprised voice exclaimed, "Is that Fenley? No wonder he's so extraordinary and imposing." Another chimed in, "Wow, seeing Fenley here is a rare honor." Another agreed, "There's no way this matter won't be resolved today." The crowd erupted in a torrent of whispers at Fenley's arrival. Fenley was one of Oakvale's four princes, and he led the Celestial Alliance. He was talented and strong, earning admiration throughout the martial world. Extraordinary talents like Fenley usually earned great respect, and his sudden arrival took everyone by surprise. Fenley? Dustin's eyes narrowed as his expression shifted. While he hadn't met Fenley, being mentioned alongside Adam hinted he was extraordinary. From the looks of it, Fenley's presence was as strong as Anders, or maybe even stronger. Fenley's here. Finally, we've got help. After the initial surprise, Eleanor and Elena felt immense relief upon seeing Fenley. It was as if they saw their savior. Eleanor and Elena knew Dustin was strong, but Fenley was even stronger. Fenley was like a superhero, especially in the Celestial Alliance. 5 years ago, he wiped out the fearsome Demonia cult single-handedly. That was his most glorious achievement. The Demonia cult was notorious in the martial world and caused suffering among the people in the borderlands. Under pressure, the authorities had to turn to the Celestial Alliance for help, and the Alliance sent Fenley. That night was a big mystery. But when the authorities went to the demon cult's headquarters, they saw a lot of dead bodies and blood everywhere. Fenley was sitting on the throne, holding the leader's head and watching the sunset quietly. After that, Fenley became a legend. Not only did he become one of Oakvale's four princes, but he was also named the successor of the Celestial Alliance. Everyone thought Fenley was like a monster. He was so strong that no one else could match him. I heard Holly was Fenley's sister, and Dustin killed her. Looks like he's doomed today. Elena gloated. Bad people will get what they deserve. Destin is strong, but compared to mythical aces like Fenley, he's not even close, Eleanor sneered. Now she finally understood Anders' plan. Anders wanted to use Fenley's strength to get rid of Destin. It was smart but risky. If Fenley found out, there would be big trouble for sure. They had to stick to their accusation against Destin no matter what happened today. Mr. Hudson. Ellen stumbled over and knelt in front of him. I'm Ellen Bossman. At your service. Holly's dead? Fenley asked, cutting straight to the chase. She's dead. Ellen looked ashamed. I arrived late for the rescue, and I asked for Mr. Hudson's forgiveness. Worthless. Fenley raised his hand and delivered a forceful slap to Alan's face, sending him flying. Alan coughed up blood and struggled to get up. Whoever killed Holly, step forward and face your death, Fenley said, his emotionless gaze sweeping the surroundings with a chilling coldness that cut to the bone. It's him. He killed Holly. Eleanor pointed at Destin angrily. She wished she could skin him alive. That's right. We saw it with our own eyes. He's the killer. Eleanor chimed in loudly. Did you kill Holly? Fenley looked at Destin as a chilling light flashed across his eyes. I didn't kill her. Someone intentionally framed me. Destin denied again. Mr. Hudson, don't listen to him. We all saw it clearly. He's the murderer. Eleanor said sternly. That's right. We can all testify. Everyone spoke up in agreement. Seeing this, Destin sighed. There was no point in arguing anymore. Despite explaining 3 times, no one believed him. Everyone had already decided he was the murderer. How dare you kill Holly? Die! Fenley waved his hand and sent a powerful gust of wind, akin to a roaring tiger, straight at Destin. Where the gust passed, tables, chairs, and dishes shattered, and drinks spilled everywhere. Destin stood firm and raised his hand to meet Fenley's attack. The collision shook the entire poised brothel. A powerful energy wave surged from the clash like a tsunami, sending the crowd tumbling and filling the air with cries of agony. The clash between the 2 mythical aces was enough to be deadly for ordinary people, even in the aftermath. After the strike, Fenley was somewhat surprised when he saw Destin unharmed. He was already a grandmother, just a step away from being an ultimate grandmother. Even though he had used only a small portion of his power, it was enough to kill a divine master. Yet, Destin had withstood the strike unscathed. So this suggested that his strength might be at the grandmother level. There were many talents in Oakvale, but reaching the master level before the age of 30 was extremely rare. Who are you? Identify yourself, Fenley coldly demanded, initially treating Destin as insignificant as an ant. Fenley now carried a trace of curiosity in his tone. However, it was just that curiosity, nothing more. It's not important to know who I am. If you don't want to be used as a pawn, you should calm down and think. I have no grudge against you or your sister, so why would I want to harm her? Destin warned. That is my question to ask, Fenley said, narrowing his eyes. I have to say this no matter if you believe it or not. Someone deliberately set this up to use you to kill me. Destin responded seriously. Who would have the guts to use me? Fenley continued asking. The 2 people behind you know all about it. Why don't you ask them? Destin raised his chin slightly toward Eleanor and Elena, hinting at something. Upon hearing that, Eleanor immediately retorted, Nonsense. Mr. Hudson, this person is deliberately accusing us to get out of trouble. Don't fall into his trap. You should kill him quickly to avenge Holly. That's right. Holly won't be able to rest in peace if you don't kill him, Elena added. They wouldn't let go of the opportunity of using someone to kill Destin. I don't care what grudges you guys have. However, someone has to be responsible for Holly's death. Since everyone thinks you're the murderer, you can't get away with it. Of course, don't say that I'm bullying you. If you can block 3 of my skills, I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. If you can't, it's the end for you. Fenley slowly gathered his energy. Suddenly, An energy vortex appeared around him. The vortex resembled a tornado. It constantly spun and greedily devoured its surrounding spiritual energy. Soon, a massive human-like shadow emerged behind Fenley. The shadow was about 19 feet tall. It was exceptionally burly, exuding a daunting aura from head to toe. It was like a deity, causing one to feel scared just looking at it. How terrifying! Is this what they call the 4 elements of God's technique? What? The 4 elements of God's technique? I thought only the Guildmaster of Celestial Alliance knew the technique. Did Fenley already master it? I've heard the 4 elements of God's technique is so powerful that it could destroy everything. Even if you have thousands of troops and horses, you won't be able to win against it. Well, it's an achievement for him to die in the hands of the 4 elements of God's technique. Watching the enormous godlike shadow behind Fenley, the onlookers couldn't help but feel greatly shocked. The 4 elements of God's technique was renowned as one of the 5 supreme skills in the martial world. It was one of the most elite techniques. Once fully mastered, one could do anything, such as commanding the sky and earth, moving mountains and seas. By that time, the person who mastered it could no longer be considered a human. They were almost invincible. No one expected that Fenley would use such a deadly skill to deal with Destin. Mr. Hudson has already used such a deadly skill. I'm sure he can kill Destin. Eleanor fixed her eyes on them menacingly. Die, he'd better die. Elena laughed maniacally. Both of their families were in a dire situation. Thus, they could only solve their crisis by killing Destin. Interesting, Destin narrowed his eyes challengingly. The 4 elements of God's technique was famed as one of the 5 supreme skills in the martial world. Thus, it was extraordinary. Without exaggeration, this was a formidable martial art that could enable a martial artist to fight with another level's martial artist. If a fully developed divine level martial artist learned it, they could fight with a grandmother martial artist. If grandmother martial artists learned it, they would be even more formidable. They would be invincible within the same level and could even challenge ultimate grandmasters. Of course, it was not an easy task to learn the 4 elements of God's technique. Only a genius would be able to master it. This is my first move. Watch carefully. Fenley slowly raised a single hand, and the energy around him began to spin even faster. A strong suction emerged from the vortex. The onlookers felt a tightening sensation. It was as if a pair of invisible hands were constantly pulling at them, attempting to draw them into the center of the vortex. From how imposing Fenley's aura was, one would be torn into pieces if they were sucked into the vortex. Everyone could only fearfully grasp onto any sturdy objects near them to prevent them from being sucked into the vortex. Fury of Wine God. After gathering his energy, Fenley thrust out his palm. The deity-like shadow behind him mirrored the same movement. With a loud boom, the air seemed to have been split apart. The majestic energy transformed into a massive palm shadow. It looked like it was going to wreck everything in its path as it hurled toward Destin. Wherever the palm shadow passed, a howling gale followed. The piercing wind directly sliced deep marks onto the ground. The damage it could cause was terrifying. Destin didn't choose to dodge. Instead, he decided to challenge it head-on. He would like to see how powerful the 4 elements of God's technique was. Black Tortoise. With a tremble, the profound and pure energy inside Destin instantly surged. In the blink of an eye, an oval-shaped protective shield formed on the surface of his body. The protective shield looked like a giant tortoise shell, covered with mysterious runes and some patterns resembling tortoise shells. Destin practiced the beast cultivation method, a unique and unparalleled existence. Although it was not one of the 5 supreme skills, it was better than it. This cultivation method centered around the beast. Azure Dragon in the east, White Tiger in the west, Vermilion Bird in the south, and Black Tortoise in the north guarded the 4 cardinal directions. Summoning each divine beast enhanced Destin's abilities accordingly. Black Tortoise could provide a strengthened defense. How stupid! A mocking smile appeared on Fenley's face when he saw Destin's actions. There was still a chance for Dustin to live if he dodged in time. However, he was just seeking death by fighting it head-on. The blade-like wind shadow struck Dustin's tortoiseshell-like protective barrier. Immediately afterward, a terrifying impact caused by two energy colliding erupted. Tables and chairs within a radius of 30 feet were instantly turned into dust. A crater formed in the ground, causing the entire Poise brothel to shake violently. It was as if there was an earthquake. The initially ancient-looking first floor was half destroyed. It looked like it was a complete mess. Huh? After noticing the situation, Fenley furrowed his brow. There was a hint of shock on his face. Fenley thought his first move would blow Dustin to smithereens. He didn't expect him to block it. Not only did the tortoiseshell-like protective barrier not crumble when Dustin faced Fury of Wine God, but it also rebounded some of the attacks. The 4 elements of God technique is truly amazing. It almost broke my defense, Dustin remarked indifferently. The corner of Fenley's mouth twitched when he heard Dustin's arrogant statement. Fenley was used to showing off before others. Unexpectedly, he was beaten by Dustin today. This feeling caused him to feel a sense of displeasure. What happened? The guy didn't die. Everyone looked at each other in shock when they saw Dustin standing in the middle unscathed. The 4 elements of God's technique was widely acknowledged as a martial arts masterpiece. Each move and technique within it carried terrifying power. There was no way Dustin could possibly withstand it. Perhaps Fenley had gone easy on him. What? He still isn't dead yet. He's as resilient as a cockroach. Elena widened her eyes in disbelief. Fenley's strike just now was extremely terrifying and destructive. Even someone as sturdy as iron probably couldn't withstand it. Yet, Dustin seemed unscathed. This was truly hard for Elena to accept. Mr. Hudson must have gone easy on them. That's why Dustin was able to escape. However, there are still 2 more moves left. Dustin will definitely be killed by then. After a moment of shock, Eleanor soon calmed down. Although Dustin was capable, he was nothing compared to Fenley. Eleanor was sure that Dustin would be dead soon if Fenley was serious about killing him. You're quite capable if you can block my 4 elements of God's technique, Fenley praised. Then he shifted gears and declared, however, your lucky days are over. I won't go easy on you later. It's up to you whether you live or die. I heard that each move in the 4 elements of God as technique is more formidable than the other. I'd really like to witness it firsthand, Dustin said indifferently. The 4 elements of God's technique were represented by 4 elements: wind, fire, thunder, and lightning. The power of each element was almost cumulative. So far, very few have been able to withstand Fury of Wine God. It was even rarer for one to be able to endure the fury of Fire God. When it came to Fury of Thunder God, no one had been able to take it on. Those who tried had all been killed. No one had seen Fury of Lightning God before. Thus, nobody knew how scary it was. After all, the 2 moves alone were enough to win against everyone. You'll have to gamble with your life if you want to see my other moves. Next up, my second skill. While saying that, Fenley raised both of his hands. His eyes suddenly turned red as if flames were blazing within them. Then, an extremely explosive aura burst forth from his body. In an instant, Fenley's hair stood on end as his robe rustled. With a loud bang, a scorching flame suddenly soared into the air, forming a massive divine shadow behind Fenley. This divine shadow had discernible features and was much more solid than the last one. It was a commanding figure of a fire deity. It was surrounded by flames, exuding an intense heat that seemed capable of incinerating everything. It's so hot. I feel like I'm burning up. What the heck? Why is it so hot? It's like being burned alive. It's so suffocating. When Fire God appeared, the temperature in Poise brothel increased rapidly. The initially cool room quickly became piping hot. Everyone felt like they were in a steamer. Even the breath they exhaled was scorching hot. A lot of onlookers couldn't handle the heat. Thus, they chose to leap from the window and save themselves. Some onlookers tried to bear the discomfort. Although they reluctantly retreated a few steps, they kept their gazes firmly on Fenley and Dustin as they tried to discern the outcome. A battle of this level was way too rare. Thus, one was very lucky to be able to watch the entire fight. Fury of Fire God! Fenley didn't waste any time. When his aura reached its peak, he thrust both palms forward. The shadow behind him immediately mirrored the same pushing motion. Following that, a crimson dragon surrounded by flames shot out. It roared and clawed at Dustin as it pounced toward him. The flame dragon bellowed with rage and collided head-on with Dustin. Its scorching flame carried a terrifying, destructive power. Black Tortoise. Just like before, Dustin didn't dodge. Instead, he activated mystical pure energy to reinforce his protective shield. The turtle shell-like protective shield trembled slightly. It emitted a layer of golden light that appeared, dazzling against the backdrop of the flames. With a loud bang, the terrifying fire dragon collided forcefully with Dustin's protective shield. Flames scattered and surged everywhere in an instant. A scorching fire instantly spread out from the center of impact and swept through the entire Poise Brothel. Poise Brothel started to tremble violently. This caused many decorations to fall off. The green tiles on the ceiling started to shower down. The fire instantly ignited the surrounding wooden structures. Quick, put out the fire. Jenny didn't care about anything else. She instructed Poise Brothel's employees to start extinguishing the fire. There was a saying that ordinary people were the ones who suffered when geniuses fought. Fenley and Dustin had only exchanged a few moves. Yet Poise Brothel was already a mess. If they continued fighting, the entire Poise Brothel would be in shambles. Unlike the people putting out the fire, the onlookers were trying to spot Dustin. The crater became even deeper after the impact just now, turning into a pit. Flames swirled in the pit as smoke billowed. Debris was everywhere. Ho. He's dead. That good for nothing. Dustin Reese is finally dead. Seeing no response from the pit, Elena thought Dustin had been crushed into pieces. Thus, she couldn't help but laugh excitedly. Suits him right. This is the consequence of provoking us. Eleanor sneered smugly. They thought a nobody like Dustin could never beat a genius like Fenley. It was just a matter of time before Dustin would be defeated and meet his end. Eleanor and Elena's biggest problem was finally solved. Just as the two women were smiling happily, a cold wind blew out the fire inside the pit. Immediately after, Dustin calmly emerged from the smoke. He was neither dead nor heavily injured. He had walked out of the pit unscathed. Except for a bit of soot on his clothes, Dustin was untouched. At the sight of him, the smile on Elena and Eleanor's face froze. The duo widened their eyes. They seemed like they had seen a ghost by how shocked they were. How could this be? Dustin didn't die. Eleanor and Elena were stunned. They couldn't process what was happening. They wondered why Dustin was unscathed. After all, Fenley's attack just now was enough to blow Dustin to bits. It seemed that they had been happy for nothing. Not only was the duo shocked, but all the onlookers were equally stunned. Everyone saw how powerful the fire god was just now. Logically speaking, Dustin couldn't have survived the impact. It was a bizarre turn of events. Not only did Dustin survive, but he wasn't injured at all. Fury of Fire God is indeed like no other. I was almost hurt by it. Dustin brushed the ashes from his clothes calmly. He had to admit that Fenley was capable. Fenley's last attack was on par with an ultimate grandmother. Since the Fire God was already so formidable, the third and fourth moves, Thunder and Lightning God, would be even scarier. Dustin started to anticipate it. His urge to fight had been awakened after a long time. You're actually fine. Seeing the indifferent-looking Dustin, Fenley couldn't help but freeze in shock. After all, Fury of Fire God was twice as powerful as Fury of Wine God. Using it to kill a grandmother martial artist was absolutely effortless. However, not only did Dustin not die, but he wasn't even injured. His defensive power was truly terrifying. I'm fine. However, my clothes are burnt. Dustin grabbed the hem of his clothes and pointed at the charred spot. Fenley was rendered speechless. Fury of Fire God was capable of killing a grandmother martial artist, yet it had only managed to char a bit of Dustin's clothes. At that, Fenley felt utterly humiliated. The 4 elements of God's technique is recognized as one of martial arts' supreme skills. Yet, he managed to block 2 of the techniques. How amazing! I have to admit he is quite capable. I wonder which alliance this capable martial artist is from. His face doesn't ring a bell to me. Everyone felt puzzled after the shock faded. The 4 elements of God's technique had always been unbeatable. It was unheard of for someone to withstand 2 techniques unscathed. It was enough for everyone to respect Dustin's skills. Mr. Hudson, stop going easy on him. You should just use whatever deadly skills you have. You have to kill him. Eleanor couldn't help yelling. Mr. Hudson, good luck. Eliminate that murderer. Eleanor followed. At this moment, both of them felt uneasy. Initially, they thought they could use Fenley to kill Dustin. They didn't expect him to fail over and over again. Most importantly, Fenley had already claimed he would let Dustin after 3 moves. If that happened, both of them were doomed. You are very amazing. It's been a long time since I met such a skilled person like you. To show my respect, I'll give my all to show you how deadly my skills are. Fenley was serious. He felt embarrassed after suffering 2 consecutive defeats. However, his urge to win had been ignited. There were a total of 4 moves in 4 elements of God's technique, and all of them were fatal. After Fury of Wine God and Fire God, there was an even stronger Fury of Thunder God. Fenley had never used it after learning it. There were simply no opponents skilled enough for him to use such a deadly move. However, Dustin seemed to be a worthy opponent. Go ahead. Dustin stood up straight. He was not afraid, for there was only determination in his eyes. Sure. Fenley nodded. After scanning his surroundings, he said indifferently, "You guys better leave if you don't want to die. Otherwise, you won't have the chance to run when we fight." After hearing his words, everyone was stunned for a moment. Then they quickly escaped from Poise Brothel. Nobody suspected Fenley's words. After all, it was simply a breeze for someone as capable as him to destroy Poise Brothel. Even the reverberation of the battle alone was extremely deadly for ordinary people. Moreover, Poise Brothel was now on the verge of collapse after the 2 attacks. It was ready to crumble at any moment. Thus, anyone who stayed there would be buried alive. Soon, the entire building was emptied. Everyone was hiding outside. They poked their heads and observed the situation, inside through the windows and doors.